Now, the word extractive really sprung out at me when I was reading because I don't know how familiar you are with the work of Naomi Klein.
Hmm.
Um, she's just like, if I could marry her brain or her prose, I would. Um, she's yeah, it's just fantastic, especially No Logo and the Shock Doctrine. But
Hmm.
there's this theme that she's constantly referring to, and it's of like an extractive economy, like in terms of the way we harvest resources. And then I read a fantastic book by Carolyn Steele called Citopia, in which she was
Hmm.
talking about extractive farming. And
Hmm.
I kind of wondered if you felt like there was a link here because people have drawn similar connections
Yeah,
um,
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I
between.
think that's what we wanted to tap into those ideas, but what we emphasize a little differently than the usual uh, meaning of extractive is that it's not just natural resources or the land that you're extracting from. You're extracting from other people. In most of history, the thing that was most valuable is human labor. It's the control of human labor that's at the center of most extractive institutions.
Okay. So would you then say that there's yeah, basically I'm trying to explore the link between the extractive institutions and then the extractive political and economic policies that come out of
Right.
it. Like, do you believe that the institutions are informing the extractive policies, or that the extractive policies are then crafting the institutions?
Both. It's a chicken and egg problem. But I think the most important thing is you cannot think of these issues without taking politics very seriously, making it center stage. Take, you know, an example of an extractive institution, the apartheid system in South Africa.
Hmm.
It has all the hallmarks of what I'm talking about. Close to 90% of the population are just there to be exploited without any economic rights. They're not even allowed to choose their occupations. They don't get education. They don't get the right to represent themselves in unions or other sorts of civic society organizations. They are heavily discriminated against in every economic aspect of their lives. And in the earlier days, they were highly coerced. Opportunities are taken away from them, so they become cheap labor. So much so that there were these color bars that made it illegal to employ black South Africans in any occupation other than the most unskilled menial ones. Now think of an economic system like that, that's archetypal extractive. Is that gonna survive if black South Africans had political rights and political power? Say, for example, South Africa was a democracy and they could vote. Yeah, sure, perhaps you can fool them for a couple of years, perhaps a decade, to keep on voting for economic institutions that impoverish them, that exploit and enslave them almost. But after a while, they're going to say, no, no, we're going to use our political power to tear down these institutions. So the only way that the apartheid economic system could survive was you had an apartheid political system that empowered that very, very narrow elite politically, built a police state. Blacks had no voice, no representation, and were repressed at every opportunity. So, extractive political institutions that monopolize political power in the hands of a few people are highly synergistic with the extractive economic institutions. And likewise for democracy, look, inclusive economic institutions are not going to survive if you have a supreme party or ruler decreeing everything, like the Chinese Communist Party or a king. So you really require some sort of inclusive political arrangement for bolstering inclusive economic arrangements.
Hmm. Okay. So the one of the things I was keen to sort of pick your brain on was this idea of creative destruction, because I have, yeah, spent a lot of time as someone born and sort of raised in my entire adult life has been in the shadow of the 2008 crash, which to me was like a major failure of politics, institutions, and finance, all sort of culminating, and greed as well, really. But
Yes,
um,
absolutely.
so I've been trying to like basically the thing that confuses me about that specific moment is that normally when we had like a big chaotic thing like that happen in the past, what would happen would be the the institutions would step in. They would say, okay, look, here's where we went wrong. Here's what we're going to make sure we do the next time. Here's the rules we're going to put in place and make sure this never happens again, basically.
Absolutely.
And those institutions just sort of failed in my mind. They failed to do anything about it. They failed to like push forwards with whatever reforms should have been necessary. They were like hampered by institutional capture or corruption or something, or just like lack of willingness to want to do something. And
all of the above, yes.
yeah, so and to me, I look at the current system and go, look, we clearly need some sort of like major reform. I don't want to be that guy calling for everything to be torn down, because as you've sort of discussed, the rarity of democratic institutions is something that should be recognized. So I don't want to like throw the baby out with the bathwater, but at the same time, I'm aware that we need to like do something, and there needs to be some sort of creative destruction within our system. Like, have you thought much about the trying to find the balance in that world, in trying to like figure out how to make reforms without just, casting everything aside that might be good about the system?
Yeah, I think those are critical questions, and you're absolutely right. You cannot understand the financial crisis and its aftermath and the inequalities that were, generated before and after the financial crisis without thinking about the atrophying of inclusive institutions in the UK, in the US, in parts of Western Europe, quite broadly. And you cannot understand them without, call it institutional capture, corruption, whatever, but the excessive power of Wall Street, excessive power of tech companies. I think all of those are clear fault lines of the institutions that have emerged in the West over the last several decades. Now, when economists talk of creative destruction, and when James and I talk of creative destruction, first it's at the level of economics. New technologies come and replace others. New firms come and replace others. That's very important. That's the idea that Schumpeter had, and it's critical. It's not to be confused with sometimes what Silicon Valley itself labels its own technologies as disruptive, because some of those may actually be disrupting exactly the things that you don't want, like the stability of social communication, democracy. So you need to define and you need to worry about the details of that. But also James and I talk about political creative destruction, which is, when is it that we can make reforms, both in the economy and in the political domain, that disempowers some vested interests that have become very powerful. Mm-hmm. And I think that's part of the story as well. I don't think it is possible to make progress on climate change, for example, without reducing the power of big oil today. And it's not possible, in my opinion, to make progress on building a more just society with more individual control over economic careers and autonomy without reducing the power of tech companies. So I think there is an element of political creative destruction, but you're absolutely right. The key question is, within what limits? And I think it is, in my opinion, it's completely off limits to threaten the democratic system. And unfortunately, what we have seen is that the right, the populist right, has been much more successful in channeling that discontent, both in the UK and in the US and in some other countries. And people like Boris Johnson, to some extent, much less, but Donald Trump or Jair Bolsonaro in Brazil, they seriously damage democratic institutions, both the norms of democratic governance and the actual institutions. US institutions, sort of survived, but just barely. Yeah. Look, another 4 years of Donald Trump, don't know, it would be much more like a banana republic.
I mean, I made the case actually to James, and I'm not sure he was particularly sold on this, but I feel like that Trump has damaged the institutions and norms in a way that I am concerned will never be recovered. Because, for example, if Malia Obama had taken like millions from some Chinese companies and then her laptop was like had very strange and compromising emails on it, that would be front page for just weeks. And then Trump came in, his family just looted the presidency. And I've no idea how they didn't impeach him on the emoluments clause. I don't understand. But then Joe Biden has come in, and it seems like his family are able to get away with a lot of things that would have been frowned upon previously because because it's like, oh, well, it's not as bad as Trump. And it's like slowly edging us away from the norms that would have dominated the.
Look, I think you are 99% right. I think Trump has damaged institutions and norms greatly. And you see that today. I mean, in the US, it's this degree of polarization that prevents even the most important branch of the government when it comes to such things, the Congress, from investigating a coup attempt during January 6th. That is an outcome of the atrophying of these norms and institutions. On the other hand, I wouldn't say never. That's where I would, perhaps be a little bit more, slightly more optimistic than you. I think, institutions have a way of rebuilding them anywhere. There's a lot of agency. You can destroy them and you can rebuild them. And throughout, the last 300 years, U.S. institutions, you can say a lot of bad things about them, but one good thing is their flexibility. They have been able to recreate themselves to deal with some pretty nasty conditions, like during the progressive era or before the progressive era, when companies, the robber barons and their companies and their political representatives in the Senate and local governments became amazingly powerful and really destroyed or came close to destroying some important aspects of inclusivity, the system did a 180-degree U-turn. Civil rights era, I don't know of many other institutions, many other countries that have been able to provide a peaceful sort of way out of such deep discrimination against a significant fraction of the population. So, I mean, of course, things are still not good for Black Americans. There are a lot of problems, but civil rights is a monumental achievement. And again, it shows the ability of U.S. institutions to allow new coalitions to emerge and forge things in a way that is much healthier. Now, today, I don't see how that's going to happen, but I'm not giving up hope.
Thanks for making it all the way to the end of the video. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and leave a comment for us in the comments below. Let me know what you thought and if you'd like to see more of this from the show. Thank you, and we'll see you again next time.